Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Fix Computers. I've got a MacBook Air here that has a floppy screen, so I'll just turn that to one side. As you can see, there's a lot of play in the screen, and if I just sort of open it to full amount, it kind of just falls back of its own accord there. Now, there's two problems going on here. One of them we can fix, and one of them would require replacing parts. The hinges themselves have loosened up over time, which means that they don't really hold very strongly and the screen can kind of fall back under its own weight. I don't think we can do much about that. We'd have to replace the hinges, which means replacing most of the display. Not really viable on the MacBook Air, and you'll see why when we get into it. However, what we can also do is where the hinges attach to the display assembly, the screws for those, we're going to find they're very loose, which means the hinges, where it should be bolted onto the display assembly, they're actually loose so they can rock like that, which is putting all of this play and slop into the screen. If we fix that, the actual tension in the hinges will probably be a lot less noticeable. So what I'm going to do first is we're going to take I'm going to take these hard plastic covers off, and we're going to take the bottom panel off of the laptop, and we're going to detach the battery and remove the display assembly. So I'm going to take a 1.2mm pentalobe screwdriver. So you can search on eBay for MacBook Pro screwdriver or something like that, or MacBook Air screwdriver, and you should find this 1.2mm pentalobe screwdriver for removing these security screws. Bottom panel off. I'm going to disconnect the battery before I do anything else. And now what we need to do is we need to undo these screen bolts, and we need to detach any cables going to the screen. So we've got the display cable down here. So this guy has a locking bar over it, and I'll just flick that up and then pull it back. Donezo. And then we also need to pull back the wireless antennas here. So I'll just pick those off. And I need to pull those out from under the logic board. Just gently pull that wire out. Some nice cobwebs there as a special surprise. There we go. On some models of MacBook Air, these guys are actually tied in underneath. There's little bits of tape over the cable. So you might have to go along with a sharp knife and just cut those bits of tape very carefully without cutting the cable itself. And now the last cable we need to get is the eyesight or webcam cable, which is this guy here. Now on some older models, it will just plug in there, so it's really easy. You can just pull it out and that's it, you're done. On this one, we've got to remove the fan. So I'll start by taking out this ribbon on top, which just pulls off. And then I'll just detach that DC cable. And now I'm going to switch to a T5 screwdriver and take the cooling fan out the way. Pay attention to what screw goes into what hole here, because each of these three screws are slightly different. However, when we put it back together again, I'll show you which one goes where. Now we'll just flip this guy out. Okay, so there's where the webcam plugs in. So I'll just nudge that out with my screwdriver. And now we should just be able to pull this out from underneath. There we go. And I'll flip the fan back into position just so that doesn't fall out. There we go. Right, now we're ready to undo these ones. So on some laptops these will be T6, and on others they will be T8. So on my one here it's a T8. So I'm going to undo the two inside screws. And I'll repeat over the other side of the laptop. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hang the whole laptop off of the back of the counter. So we'll open it up and just hang it on the back so the screen is open and the screen is hanging down over the back of the countertop. And now we can take out the remaining two screws. And what we'll find now is I can just lift that off. There we go. That's a quick test. As you can see, there's a lot of play in both of those hinges. That one not so bad, but that one's really bad. So let's move the body out of the way and we can now take a close look at those hinges. So to get access to the hinges now, I'm going to slide this black bar to the right and then we're going to lift it off. So slide to the right. Oh. Ooh, it doesn't want to move. Oh, that's being incredibly stubborn. Oh, I've never had one of these give me this kind of trouble before. Oh. There we go. I just started working it back and forth and now it's moving. That's better. Okay, so now I've slid it to the right as far as it will go until it butts up against that hinge. I'm just going to use a prying tool just to ease it out. So we need to be a little bit careful because there are cables and things inside here. So we just need to try and gently pry it out and we need to make sure that it clears those cables as it comes off. I think this has had something spilled on it before. There we go. And off it comes. So yeah, I think something had been spilled down the front of the screen. So the insides look fine, but yeah, there was something spilled in there that had just gone dry and sticky and just gummed it all up. Okay, let's take a closer look at these hinges. So as you can see, the display cables physically go through the hinge. And this is why the hinge is not really straightforward to replace, because you'd have to replace the display cables. And to replace the display cables, you have to remove the LCD. And removing the LCD from one of these MacBook Air display assemblies is a bit of a journey. I have never successfully done it because the display is kind of baked into the assembly shell itself. Unless you are an expert, and if you're watching this walkthrough, you're probably not, it's not viable, basically. I've looked into it and I was just like, what in the hell? No, all of the no. So yeah, we can't really replace them. So that means that you're stuck with whatever tension they have left in them. However, what we can do is we can just push that wire back a little bit. And as you can see, there are 3 screws there. And these are the guys that have come loose. So I'm going to get a T6 now. And I'm just going to nip these guys up. Oh no, that's a T8 as well. Yeah, that's a T8 as well. So I'm going to try and center that as best I can. And then just nip those up. And just give them a little bit of a bite. 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 not graunching them, just a bit, just to go, "Arr!" You know, you need the grr. And that's all. And we'll go over to the other side and we'll do the same thing. So this one, as you can see, that's super bad. Same deal. Whoa. Actually put a full turn into that one, I think. Same there. Yeah, and once again, bite. Bite. And bite. Because we're screwing into metal, we can be a little bit vicious. Again, it's not a car, but just a bit of a bite. And that's done. While I'm here, I'm going to grab a toothbrush and I'm just going to toothbrush them all down. Just pull that slack back through and just take off any dust and schmutz that's trapped in here. And that should be it. Let's put the cover back on. So for the cover, the flat side goes at the back and the rounded side goes toward the screen. And yeah, I can feel stickiness there, but So again, we're positioning it so it's offset to the right. I'm just going to gently work that over the top. And we're going to make sure that's sitting nice and low. So there should be no gap along the bottom. No gap, no gap. And then that should just slide to the left. There we go. And that's locked into place again. And now we're ready to put the display back onto the laptop. So we'll just sit that on top. So that's hanging off the side. And now I'll put one screw into each side. And we're going to do the outside ones. And I'm not doing these up tightly, I'm doing them up fairly loosely. So the screen can still move and there's a bit of slop and wobble in that. That's on purpose. So now what I can do, I can close the lid. And I'm going to check that the screen is all lined up. I'm not a massive fan of these hard shell cases, to be honest, because they just trap dirt and grit in them. But yeah, don't rough and tumble your laptop is the better solution in my opinion. Okay, that's fine. So now what we can do is on the right hand side we can just put the remaining screws in. And then the left hand side we need to position the cables before we put the other screws in. So down here we've now got to line this guy up, so we'll just tuck that under the I/O board. And we'll put the first screw in. And I've just put that in like halfway, it's not even fully in. And that just means that when I put this screw in, it can just automatically align that little cable retention bracket where it wants to sit. There we go. And now all the screws are in, I'm going to do one last alignment check. And then just tighten them all up. And again, I'm going to give them just a bit of bite. It's worth mentioning the screwdriver I'm using, I use wearer screwdrivers. Not very good handles, very good heads. Because these handles are very thin, they limit the amount of force I can put into the screwdriver. And that can often be a good thing. The reason why small screwdrivers have small handles is that if you gave a small screwdriver a big handle, you just shear off bolts with it. There we go. Right, those are all done up. Now we'll reconnect our cables. So the display cable, this is the one which can be the most dangerous to reconnect. So what I'm going to do is make sure the locking lever is back. We're going to very carefully line that up and just gently ease that in. So that's straight, and now we'll just push that in. There we go. make sure it doesn't go in at an angle or anything like that, because if you chip the corner of this guy, you'll have a bad day. So that's done. Close the locking lever. He's all sorted. Now we'll flip the fan back out and get the webcam cable back in place. So that guy just goes across the board and under that little notch. Then it goes around the outside, around the fan. And plugs into there. And I'll just grab a screwdriver just to help line that into position. There we go, that's that in. Tuck the cable in. And now we'll put the fan screws back in. So the fan screws, there is the screw that has the thick head on it, like this guy. Notice how that's got a big old hat on it. This one goes over here in the bottom left. And then from the two remaining screws, we've got a short one and a long one. And I've just dropped the long one. So the long one goes at the back here. And then the short one goes into here. It is critically important that the short one goes into this screw hole here, because this screw hole goes all the way down to the logic board. And if you put a long screw in there, the screw will go all the way down to the logic board and start drilling into the logic board itself. That's called long screw damage. And if you long screw your logic board, you will have a bad day. Right, that's done. Let's reconnect the DC cable. And we can stick the I/O ribbon back on top. That's that done. Now the last item of business is the wireless cables. So I'm just going to use my prying tool here just to tuck this guy back under the logic board. This sometimes takes a couple of attempts. It can be a bit finicky. Sometimes you'll nudge it in a certain place and it'll just pop back out again. I'm going to try and get it behind the screw holes, because the screw holes will hold it in place. There we go. It's not fully tucked in at the left side yet, but I'm going to get it connected because then it can't jump out again. So these guys are just push fit connectors, but just make sure you're lined up and it should go on with almost no effort. If you get it wrong, you'll flatten one of these connectors and you'll have a bad day. Tweezers make this easier. I'm making quite a hash up of this right now. There we go. Now the other one. There we go, that's him on. Now we can come back to here and tuck this guy in, and it's not going to jump out of place because it's plugged in everywhere else. There we go, that's in. Now before I put the Boston case back on, I'm just going to wipe it down. Oh, we better connect the battery as well. We'll probably want that. Battery reconnected. And bottom panel back on. And I'm just going to put in 2 screws, just in case I have to take it all apart again because I got something wrong. And we'll check that it works. Right, so first of all, that's now much firmer. And we've actually, so that wobble you can see, that's just spring tension in the metal. However, it's actually firm. And all of that flop at the back end of the travel has now disappeared. It's a little bit loose back there, but it's not falling under its own weight anymore. We can set that to almost fully open, and it stays there instead of just flopping back to fully open. So that is a vast improvement. It's still loose where it's an older laptop. However, much, much better than it was before. Mission accomplished. Does it turn on? The first time you turn it on after you've had the battery disconnected, it might take it a couple of moments to restart. You might have to plug in the power adapter as well. There it goes. It just chimed. And there's our Apple logo. There we go. Right. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I hope that was useful to all of you. That's how you fix a floppy screen on a MacBook Air. Bye for now.